Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead. Third time's a charm. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Our first thing on the agenda is our presentation by our Department of Human Services Commissioner Rose. And we look forward to your presentation. And with that, I will give you the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I usually don't do slides, so I will go ahead and apologize if I forget to move them. I will catch them back up if I don't. If at any point anyone has questions, please don't be shy about just interrupting me. I'm fine with that. Otherwise, I'll feel like I'm just talking and talking and talking, and I'm happy to pause at any point. But thank you for having me here. It really is an honor. I hope I will do justice for the Division of Family and Children's Services, which is what I'm here today to talk about the great work that we're doing. And even though I could talk about the work for the entire allotted slot, I'm not going to cover everything good that they're doing. So just want to say that point blank at the very beginning. At the Department of Human Services, DFACS is the biggest division. It's over 7,000 employees, and I have served as the state DFACS director and the commissioner of DHS for over 3 years now. Operationally, DFACS is split into a North, Metro, and South district, and there are 3 district directors. And so those district directors then have regions that they oversee. And then the region directors oversee county directors assigned to them. At the county level, there's the county director, a deputy director, an administrator. There are program directors. And those are typically divided into sections. So you'll usually have like child protective services, foster care, and family preservation services, and then supervisors underneath each of those sections, and then case managers, but people will call case managers social workers, or they'll call them caseworkers. So I may use those terms interchangeably, but trying to make sure you have that. I won't talk about this just yet for a while, but I'm gonna go ahead and flip over. So under Georgia's mandated reporting law, teachers, police officers, school officials, doctors, nurses, foster parents, our staff, and others are required to report suspected child abuse. Members of the public also make reports. We get reports for children of all backgrounds. That's important later. So that means children who aren't in foster care, those who are missing, Georgia children, children who are missing from other states but could be in Georgia, children who have involvement with the Department of Juvenile Justice, etc. People contact our centralized intake communication center. I call it KIC. Other people call it the CPS hotline. What constitutes child abuse? It's what the law says it is. But DFACS spells it out based on the code in our policy and training. Examples include bizarre punishment, sexual abuse, abandonment, emotional abuse, inadequate supervision, educational neglect, domestic violence, burns, and imminent risk of serious harm. There are plenty of other categories. That is just a few. When people report suspected child abuse, KIC workers gather information about the child's alleged maltreater, when, what, and where, and that's in a standardized format. Those workers screen our system. We call that SHINES. They look at other databases, they assign maltreatment codes, and they decide whether to screen it in or screen it out. The report, which we also call intakes, goes to the county, and they decide whether to change the KIC's recommendation based on their knowledge of the family and the community. Law enforcement gets a copy of that intake, even if it's a screen out. We keep copies in our case management system, SHINES, and we review them if we get new intakes involving the same alleged maltreaters or children. Some intakes are duplicative, so if we have an open case, we may screen out the new one, but we would still add it as a reference point in that open case. An intake might also be dubbed a screen out and refer, where a county will attempt to contact the family via phone or letter to offer community resources or services. So many people believe a screen out means that DFACS does nothing, but now you know that is inaccurate. If an intake gets assigned, aka screened in, a county case manager must go out to evaluate the child, evaluate the parents or their legal caregivers, since not all children live with their biological or adoptive parents, and the case manager must check the household for safety. DFACS cannot force people to let us into their homes. So depending on the intake's nature, we may ask the police to go with us, or we may call the police if the parents refuse to cooperate or if they get violent when we arrive. If we exhaust our options and the parents won't cooperate, we may have to close our case, even if the allegations are serious. But let's assume that the parents are willing to work with us. If no safety threat exists, but the family needs support, it becomes a family support services case. The case manager works with the family to address their needs through community referrals to agencies for things like counseling, money to pay their electricity bill, food, through a food bank, things like that. If a safety threat exists, it becomes a child protective services investigation. DFACS policy says the investigation should be completed within 45 days, but it can be shorter or longer if needed. Sometimes we get to the home and it is obvious the child cannot remain. Here are some real-life examples from recent events. The home is covered in animal feces, there is no food, and the children are starving. There's no electricity, the mother has unresolved mental health issues, there's no family nearby to assist. Remove. The parents are actively abusing fentanyl and their toddler ingested it off the coffee table, nearly killing her. The parents were arrested. Remove. The mother is abusing drugs and behaving erratically. There is meth in the home. The children are malnourished. This one is a little uncommon. The case manager enters the home and discovers the children are locked in the closet as punishment. And if they were not locked in the closet, they were outside in a wooden box. They were removed. In those scenarios, we'd immediately contact the juvenile court. Sometimes it's the after hours line to give the facts and ask for custody. We can get a verbal removal order. In every scenario, removal is traumatic and it is often dangerous for the child and the case manager. Here are additional real-life examples, and I asked veteran DFACS staff for these. I had a toddler so upset from being removed from his mother that he vomited all the way to the foster home. The dad, these are all different. The dad told me he lived on 150 acres and no one would find me out there. I was sitting in the driveway of the foster home holding a little boy in my arms while he screamed and cried, asking me why I hated him and why I wanted to break up his family. His sister was beside me crying and saying her heart hurt so much that she thought she was having a heart attack. The case manager had an open case where the parents were abusing drugs and the children often smelled of urine and feces. She did an unannounced home visit and found a meth lab. She got emergency custody from a judge and went out with law enforcement. The children's father had also called her earlier that day and threatened she'd leave in a body bag if she removed them. Police secured the home first. Later, she learned he'd had his scope on her, but they got to him first. Different story. The father trapped me in his kid's bedroom until law enforcement arrived. I had to explain to a child that he was not the reason his sister passed away. He was only 12 when he was left at home with his special needs sister for an entire weekend. There is nothing worse than hearing a child scream when they're being forcibly removed from a parent. We almost always have law enforcement on hand. In CPS investigations, the case manager must decide whether to substantiate or unsubstantiate the maltreatment allegations against the alleged maltreater. If an allegation is substantiated, the alleged maltreater gets a letter with directions on how to file an appeal if they wish to do so, and that's a lengthy process. I'm not going to go into that here. The case manager also decides whether to progress the case to foster care or family preservation services, or they can close it. The case manager also chooses whether to move forward with a safety plan or court involvement. Per DFAC's policy, if they think a safety plan is appropriate, they negotiate with the child's caregiver or caregivers on what they must do to keep the child safe, and they monitor their compliance. DFACs can go to court if they fail to comply, or DFACs can go straight to court. It depends on the circumstances. Whenever we go to court, we might ask the judge for a protective order, or we might ask the judge to place the child in our custody. We do not take a child into foster care without a court's permission. People do not realize that. Once a child enters foster care, the child and their parents get attorneys. DFACs is represented by a special appointed attorney general, AKA SAG. We just use the acronym. Removal of a child into foster care means a foster care case manager takes over from the CPS investigator. Depending on the child's needs, the foster care case manager must find an appropriate placement, ideally with a relative, fictive kin, or with a provider. Typically, that means a foster home or a group home. We are always going to try to keep siblings together. The case manager will develop a case plan with the child's parents, and the goal is family reunification unless aggravated circumstances exist. If reunification is off the table, we pursue adoption or guardianship. Permanency is the goal. But if they age out of care without permanency, we strive for successful transition into adulthood. Throughout a child's time in our care, they receive Medicaid, vision and dental care, clothing, educational support, and other assistance, coordinated primarily by their case manager. Okay, now I'm going to move into the CPS hotline, but I call it KIC, Centralized Intake. Last fiscal year, KIC received 149,786 calls from people to report suspected child abuse. Of those, there were nearly 123,000 actual reports of suspected child abuse. Most of those reports came from school officials, and the top category was neglect. From just July 1st last year to January 1st of this year, KIC workers spent 9,230 hours taking calls. Currently, we have 143 KIC employees. KIC is always open. On average, they receive 800 calls a day. At KIC, as you can imagine, we need accurate information from every child abuse report. About a year ago, we deployed robotic process automation, we call them bots, to eliminate manual, time-intensive data entry. When mandated reporters use our online form to make reports of suspected child abuse, staff previously had to manually key that information into Shines, our case management system. Now, using bots, it takes less than half the time, and it's far more accurate. Bots also automate how we generate those law enforcement reports I told you about. Since we send every intake we get, we send a copy of that to law enforcement, even if it doesn't get assigned for assessment by DFACs. And bots also now pull open records requests for us. So that's, for us and for the public, a big win for transparency, and it cuts down on processing time. All right, now I'm going to talk about the data lake. The DFACS data lake is one of the first projects launched after I moved over to the agency. If a county assigns a report for CPS investigation, they may need more background on the people in the home before they go out. Previously, a case manager would have to log into each of these systems, and they would have to use different login credentials. So I don't know about you, but I forget my Apple ID password at least once a month, if not more often. And they would have to keep it all of theirs. I can't imagine having to do that. We pulled all of those databases into one portal. We integrated it with Shines. and it's one singular login. It's the same one that they use for everything that they use, their email, all of the same. Case managers went from spending an average 91,250 hours per year doing records checks to an average 5,110 hours annually, a massive reduction in time. And that means you get to do things like spend time with your kids. And so this lady, this is Tara Broadhead. She won last year's Chief Justice Hines Award for Outstanding Advocacy for Children in Dependency Proceedings. And she is a legend at DFACS. She goes above and beyond for her kids. Check out that trash truck. She had a child on her caseload that was absolutely obsessed with trash trucks. And she spent several weeks making it. The lights actually worked. She also made these, a vending machine, skee ball, that claw machine. She would literally get in the claw machine to operate it for her kids. I stole her from Cherokee County DFACS. She now works in the special, I'm sorry. She is a specialized foster care case manager in the Special Victims Unit, which I will tell everyone about later. I will say there are Taras everywhere throughout DFACS. You probably have a Tara in your district. There are a lot of very special people throughout DFACS, but I thought you would want to see Tara. And I will get to the hoteling side in just a little bit, but I have some other things to tell you about in the meantime. All right. Recently, a beloved but highly opinionated colleague at DFACS who has only ever worked at DFACS and for 20 plus years told me an exercise that she does to teach people about being a new DFACS case manager. So envision that she goes into a big conference room, and to greet everyone, she tells them to pull out an imaginary calendar, and she starts off with something like this. She says, "Congratulations, you've just been hired by Clark County DFACS as a foster care case manager making $47,000 a year. And you are thrilled. So you meet with your supervisor. It's October 1st, and she tells you that this job is not your typical 40-hour work week, but if you go over those hours, you can get flex hours. And you love working with families, so you're thrilled, and she gives you a list to go ahead and start planning, so you're ready to get going. Right out of the gate, you have to plan out 2 half-day mandatory staff meetings, so you mark those off, 1 full day of training, 2 hours one way, 6 on-call nights, those are 2 weekdays, and 2 weekend days. You need to visit each child on your caseload at least once per month. You need to interview each child alone. That has to be at least 30 minutes. You probably don't want to exceed an hour. You need to interview each child's caregiver, and you need to accommodate their scheduling needs. So they may not be able, obviously, to do the days that you offer. You definitely want to accommodate their needs. Don't forget, per DFACS policy, that each child needs to be in school or daycare. Also, this month, you need to expect at least 2 half days of court. To prepare for court, there'll be at least 1 hour staffings per case with our DFACS SAG. Every month, you also staff every single case with your supervisor, and those can run long. For a caseload of 15, that's at least 30 minutes per case. So that's at least 7.5 hours of staffings per month. That doesn't include staffings that occur when problems arise. For every parent, you also need to visit every month. That's preferably a home visit, but we go where they are. And again, you need to try to accommodate their schedule and needs. You need to accommodate or account for the travel time to their home if you're able to do a home visit. If they're incarcerated, you also have to account for travel time. If you can only do a phone call, they may not answer the first try. You may not have the right number. You may have to try multiple times. If the only way you can reach them is via letter, you may have to try to track down the right address. You have to write the letter. You have to send the letter. Please account for that time. The children on your caseload might be placed in homes in other counties. Again, account for the travel time. You also have very specific time limitations on how to document the work that you're doing in our case management system. Throughout the day, you'll be expected to promptly respond to emails, calls, and texts. Hopefully, none of your planning falls apart if someone has to reschedule or an emergency occurs. Also, please have a personal life. Make plans, have fun, go to the doctor. Welcome to DFACS. Please do not make any mistakes. I think it's important. When she showed me the exercise, I thought it was really insightful to know what we expect of our frontline workers, because they do work with the most vulnerable children in our state, and they make critical decisions, and sometimes they don't get it right. And some of them are fresh out of college. The same colleague recently told me that I also need to understand that case managers really quickly have to get comfortable with people being constantly mad at them, that if they're too patient with the child's parents, it might upset the foster parents. If they disagree with the guardian ad litem, it might anger the judge. If they're working late on a case, it might disappoint their family. So they're always having to navigate these disappointments. If a case manager doesn't remove a child because they think services will work and tragedy occurs, the guilt may very well eat them alive. Perfect decision-making in the moment may appear imperfect in the wake of tragedy. DFACS cannot predict human behavior with perfect accuracy because no one can. Right now, DFACS has about 10,400 children in foster care, and it's remained largely steady over recent years. Courts are legally mandated to exhaust every alternative before they order a child into foster care. However, at hospital discharge or release from juvenile detention, a child's caregivers might no-show or threaten it, and the court may put a child with complex needs or criminal charges who isn't technically or legally abused or neglected into DFACS custody. And it can be challenging to find a placement or a treatment bed for that child. Thankfully, we have a really strong network of providers. And in recent years, the governor and the General Assembly have made historic multi-million-dollar investments, bipartisan investments, to raise our providers' rates. We cannot survive without our providers. And I just want to say, they'll soon circulate results from a survey to show you some recent struggles that they're having, specifically about insurance premiums. One provider's premium just this year increased by $200,000. I know tort reform is a hot topic. I'm not trying to wade into this area. I'm not saying a thing about it. I'm just saying, we are so reliant on our providers, and I just wanted to say, I know it's a tough issue, but if you'll just take a look at what they're experiencing and know that we can't get by without them, I think that it's something worthy of consideration, since we can't afford to lose any of them. We cannot afford to lose a single one of our providers. All right, hoteling. Hoteling is the practice of temporarily placing a foster child in a hotel or office when a case manager cannot find an appropriate foster home, group home, or healthcare facility able to meet the child's needs. Many state and local child welfare agencies use offices, hotels, emergency shelters, extended ER stays, and similar settings when they cannot find a home or facility to take a child. They just don't talk about it as transparently as we do, I find. To end our reliance on hoteling, we were very vocal about it, and our providers were fighting right there with us. We also developed a new role to specifically coordinate specialized placements. We unveiled emergency grants for providers to accept high-needs youth. You put millions of dollars in our base budget so we could negotiate specific rates for specific children based on what they needed in a home. And that's why you can see such a cliff. You can see at one point we were putting over 90 children in a hotel. on one night in the state of Georgia. But we just put literally everything into it. We were laser focused for 2 years, and you see that we just hit that perfect spot where it all worked together, and you hit the cliff. We still have emergencies. I mean, we said all along that you can't maintain zero. I mean, emergency situations happen, and that's why you're going to keep seeing that fluctuation. We get custody of children with complex needs who need a bed in a healthcare facility, but there's a wait list. That's the most common situation. And DFACS, we don't run healthcare plans. We don't set up networks. That's not something we can control. So we are very reliant on external factors. When there's a wait list, we have to wait. And it's often a bidding war between us and other payers, and especially other states for those beds. We also have situations where judges will give us custody of teenagers, I mentioned this, with charges, and those can be tough placements to find. But again, what you see here is vastly different from DFACS 3 years ago when I first walked through the door, and we're really proud of tackling it. It took everyone in our organization and the legislature and our providers to make it happen. We also built a tool to be more proactive. Argo is the name. It's a real-time, one-stop shop to match our children with services and placements that are tailored to meet their needs. DFACS would use a phone tree or an email tree to contact everyone and see what we could find. Now there's one place where they can do that if they'd like. We also launched Communicare. It's a tool for a child's parents, their foster parents, and CASAs to access records, upload documents, share calendars, and more on demand. Means they're not asking their case manager for this stuff. They can do it on their own if they'd like. And as a general matter, we're trying to work on technology that will empower staff to focus on serving families and children and not have to do as much paperwork and administrative work. We also we're extremely appreciative of the historic pay raises and the benefits that have benefited state employees, and so thank you for that, because we're seeing the change occur. We're seeing retention and solid recruitment, and that means for the child welfare workforce that it's making a big difference. All right. SHINES is our case management system for records of child abuse reports, investigations, foster care cases, adoptions, family support cases, family preservation cases, and other files. It's quite old, but we continue to make upgrades primarily for security. It's not super user-friendly, and the data quality isn't great. Based on how I explained our workflow earlier, you can imagine the importance of reviewing case history for a child and their family. It might, in fact, take hours to read through every case. One major issue with SHINES is that it doesn't let you search across cases by keyword. In fact, you can't even search by first or last name only. So if someone mistypes a person's name in our system and you don't search it just right, you might miss an entire case. If you miss an entire case and you're trying to assess safety of a family, that is a big problem in DFACS world. So we recently rolled out a new tool. It's called Case Notes Search. Very innovative name. A user-friendly portal that allows you to search across cases by keyword, and you can find case history a lot easier, and it has helped us find relatives a lot easier, fictive kin. In human trafficking cases, it has helped us find common perpetrators across cases, and there are plenty of other use cases, but of course, we just needed it to be something that made it easier on staff to do their work. And technology will keep being a priority for DFACS in child welfare. I will take a break. Does anyone have any questions? I'll keep rolling. Okay.
There you go. You're on.
You talked about foster care. I'm particularly interested in the group of foster children that have physical and mental disabilities such that they never would be placed in a regular foster home. So we have some facilities across the state to do that. Can you talk about how many of those facilities and how much that costs and how we fund that?
For children that are like medically fragile or that have intellectual or developmental disabilities, I mean, our preference is that we place them in foster homes that have special training and just special attention for those children.
And is one in Glenn County?
Let me get you those numbers because there aren't a ton of those foster homes, but they are specially equipped to serve those children because we don't have a lot of those children either. But I'll get you the numbers because we have also certain providers that's really their wheelhouse for us.
Rick probably knows all about
Yeah,
it.
Morningstar there, I believe. I'm from
Oh, yes, and we also, I mean, we have providers that take children with more complex needs in a congregate care setting, so we can get you more figures on that too.
Particularly interested in funding for those.
And follow up. First, I want to say, great job on the hoteling. I was I retired as superintendent, and that was a big issue back when I was doing that. And you guys really made some amazing strides when you were doing it. So kudos to you and your team. And if you've already went over this, please don't repeat it. I'll go back and watch the replay. The way you kind of the staffing goes at the local regional offices now. I know quite a few work from home, I guess, and so you don't have the traffic flow you used to in the offices, or times are troubles finding someone there. Anything you can talk about that, or kind of the philosophy of more of that type situation? In
Right.
And if you already have, I apologize. I'll go back.
No, I haven't. I mean, for DFAC's offices in general, what we've been doing is we're still trying to recruit people that will man, the front desk. We have offices with specific hours. You can set appointments if you need to come in. On the child welfare side, at no point did we ever stop doing our like emergency CPS work in person. But what I'll do is we'll put together those office hours operations. In fact, we have that handy if you want to take a look. And then if you have any follow-up questions, I can get it for you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we have lots of questions now. Four.
Hi, thank you. That was a very good presentation. I really appreciate what you do and have a background in a little bit of this. But wanted to ask you, do you have kind of an estimate on your group home placement versus foster home placement, like percentage-wise, how many children tend to go to the group homes versus the
We
foster?
do. Yeah, I mean, we have it. It's a real-time update that we have. We have a dashboard, so we can get you those numbers if you'd like.
Okay, great. And then also, follow-up question on that is shortages that you have. Do you also have the data on shortages on staffing that you're looking for both DFACs and in foster homes? Like in a perfect world, what your goal numbers are, what you have? I was just curious on that.
I mean, I think generally the answer is going to be that we always just need more foster homes, and we need more specialized foster homes. We need foster homes for teenagers. We need foster homes that are willing to take any child that has more complex needs. In terms of staffing, we can probably give you some comparison numbers of what we operated with versus what effect COVID had. So we can pull some of that for you and give you comparisons.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Okay. Number
And
seven.
I do still have, if you want me to, just so you know, I still have a little bit to go, but
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're just taking a question break.
Okay.
It's all good. 7. I think that's me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Quick gave me y'all's updated information about the housing voucher program for
Yes.
the age. Thank you very much for that. That's something that I hope will be of help in the transition planning for the child who we do not want to age out of foster care as a legal orphan.
Right.
And those transition plans are supposed to begin at age 14, aren't they, by statute?
That's my understanding, yes.
So I hope that this housing plan can be utilized and we won't have the homeless rate of 18-year-olds. I am interested in your kind of your big number because they sound consistent with past history. If 149,000 calls turned into 127 something thousand complaints, is your I'm told your abuse calls that are completed are screened out have doubled in number right now. Is that accurate?
No. Let me get some more information for you on that, because I don't.
Because consistent in historically, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to bring this out of my memory, that about 40% would be screened out. So if that's doubled, that would be concerning. So
I don't think it's quite that high, but we'll pull the data for you.
and children reunified within 12 months has declined significantly. Is that correct?
What is this? Let's see if yeah. I've got it in here.
Because it used to be that 25-30% would be returned home within a few weeks or months. That's kind of an isolated emergency where the family can recover. But that if that's changed, if there are fewer children returned home in a year, I'd be interested in that data.
Okay, we'll pull that for you.
There is a statute we passed a long time ago, I'm sure the chair's familiar, on child abuse protocols. And that, if I'm remembering correctly, that's the statute that really local communities, law enforcement and social workers make a plan about when the police go out
Right.
and when they don't go out and how they are protective of the caseworker. And that's always been a big concern. I'm guessing those child abuse protocols are still working effectively.
Some of them haven't been updated recently. I'm just speaking anecdotally,
Right.
but I know of a few counties, especially some of the big ones in the metro area, that have not been updated until very recently, and I think it just was because of COVID. They just sort of lapsed. There's also been so many new officers too that, like we've been asked recently several times to prepare training to teach new officers on sort of the basics of DFACS.
The reason I'm asking is that we've had a lot of new discussions this year that sound new to me about DFACS becoming a law enforcement entity or having law enforcement responsibilities. And that just is different from the history of how you wanted communities to work together rather in opposition or in competition with one another.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
I will, and because you've asked me about this, and I've got some good examples, so I'm going to go at length into what we're doing versus what we're not doing. So I hope I can smooth all of that over.
Then well, that's just an area I'm interested in
Right.
because historically, caseworker is not a cop.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Your seatmate, I guess, Representative Panich has a question.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being here and for the presentation. My question is, you explained the hard job a case manager has, and $47,000 a year is not enough for somebody with that level of responsibility. What is your current level of turnover compared to before you came in, and what do you think can help? Well, I guess let's see what the answer is. And
I don't have the number handy for when I came in. I just know it was probably higher than what I'm about to tell you, because I came in July of 2021, and things were quite difficult at that time. So for state fiscal year 2024, the year-end turnover rate was 43.6%. I'm talking about case managers. It was 18.4% through January for state fiscal year 25, and that is 6.8% lower than the same month last year. So I can get you the additional numbers to show you some more historical data, but that's just what I have handy.
Are you planning to ask appropriations for more money for salaries?
Look, this salary has gone up significantly in recent years with investments, and so we are very thankful for that. I want to operate within reasonable means, so of course I'm going to advocate for our workforce any way that I can. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Number 10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a two-part question. The first question is kind of bouncing off of the chairman with those that are special needs. What is the oversight for those homes? I mean, you're telling me that you have a turnover in case managers. So where is the oversight that inspects these homes or followed to make sure there's no additional abuse to any of them, actually, but specifically those with disability, learning and physical disabilities?
So we have, all right, so if it's a DFACS recruited foster home, then we have the Office of Provider Management within DFACS that's regularly inspecting them. Of course, if we're getting a report that there's been suspected abuse in the home, we're going out to do that investigation. If it's a child placing agency, which is an agency we contract with to help us recruit foster homes, they also will do investigations, plus we will do investigations. We'll do regular inspections on top of those investigations. We have another entity within our agency called Residential Child Care Licensing that is inspecting so many of our providers. So there's actually significant overlapping inspections and regulatory authority. You might actually hear from our providers that it can be quite burdensome, and there's some conflict in certain areas, in fact, that can be difficult for them to navigate. So I will say there is significant regulatory authority in place. Now, at the end of the day, what we want to make sure is that safety is put first. So if there's an area where we need to improve, we want to hear about it.
And if I may, bouncing off of Representative Oliver, what does that phase out process look like when you've aged out of the program? What does that look like? I mean, you're 18 and you cannot no longer go to a foster home. What options are you given?
Well, you have in Georgia, we actually offer extended foster care for nearly all children. And so you can opt into extended foster care. There's certain requirements. So you could stay in until you're 21. We'd work with you to try to ease that transition process. We would actually do a lot of work leading up to that before you would.
Skills.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it's actually quite complicated. So if I tried to explain it right now, I'm not going to do it justice. But what I will do is, if you will make a note, then we can provide more information to you so that we actually adequately cover it.
Thank you.
All right. Number 1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. I wanted to ask regarding the data program that you implemented. I think that the 91,250 manual hours that were reduced to 5,110 hours. Did the workforce, was it reduced, or are the are the employees doing different tasks, or what are how
that,
are you?
that was literally the amount of time they were spending to search
Mhm.
across those different databases. By just putting all of it in one spot,
Right.
they don't spend nearly as much time. So that's just
So-
compiling it. The search function
Yes.
condense the time. So now, I mean, they are spending other time doing other work.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to ask if the workforce reduced
No.
because you. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Number 8.
Yes. Yeah, I got a couple of questions about your turnover and retention and all that kind of stuff. So you mentioned a 43% turnover rate. What does that mean? 43% don't make a year, or what is 43% turnover?
It's 43.6% of the workforce leaves.
Every year.
Yes.
And so that equates to what kind of vacancy rate does that equate to in the agency?
That's a very complicated question, specifically for DFACS. Sorry.
Yeah, a number higher than 43. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is that because we don't, the way that we budget is not by position, right? It's we
Right.
get a bucket of money and we figure out what money we have to fund positions. And so I can do my best to try to run some projections based on, like, at a certain point in time, what we thought maybe the vacancy rate was, but I don't know offhand
Gotcha.
what a number is for you.
I guess, and with that, I guess the overall experience level, I know like in law enforcement, if you're less than 2 years, you're considered a rookie, and if there's too many rookies on a force, that's a bad thing. What do y'all have a metric on what a experienced agent is, and how many of those do you have, or anything to measure that in your agency?
We do. Yeah, we have different levels of, like, as you come in as a case manager, what education experience you have. We have a career ladder. So we can get that to you.
But so as an agency, you're not really quite sure where you are on that, but I'm guessing there's a lot of very new people, or is...
Well, at the case manager level, yes, we have a lot of new graduates, certainly, but there's also plenty of case managers that come in that also have a master's degree in
Right.
social work. So
I got you. So I guess going back to retention, we talk about money, and I know that's a very important part of retention, but that's only one part of a retention. I
Right.
know there's a whole lot of other parts of a job that can cause people to leave or stay. I mean, what do you see? I mean, what do you think some of the greatest things that could be done to help this problem? I mean, is it money, or is it other things that need to be addressed?
I'm going to give you some good examples. I'm going to give you some good examples coming up. Personal safety, big one.
Okay.
Big one. Professionalism. I think people often lack professionalism toward our case managers
Right.
in profound ways.
I was in law enforcement. I know, and this was like over 25 years ago, and the media was tearing up our social workers particularly bad at that time. And having worked with I really definitely have a soft spot in my heart for that, because I saw what they went through, and so I know that is definitely a factor.
Yes.
But so I guess the other thing that when I've talked to social workers, case workers, I guess is whatever the right term to use, that has kind of bothered me is the out-of-pocket expenses that they
Yes.
wind up incurring to do their job. Are
Yes.
we able to make any progress on that?
We are. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I found out at DFACS, forgive me, we require, we're changing this, but we would make staff go and get a business check for things. So, for example, if we had an employee that wanted to celebrate, do like a foster parent celebration event, and they wanted to buy, the example I got was they wanted to buy like 6 crock pots to celebrate these foster parents because they've gone above and beyond. They had to go and get special permission and go through, 6 levels of permission and go and get a business check for the exact amount of the crock pots. And they had to go get the check from regional accounting. They go based on the advertised amount at Walmart at their local store, get the check. That took, 2 weeks. Take it to Walmart because Walmart might be the only one that's still taking business checks at this point. If y'all even, do you know a place that takes business checks? I don't. By the time they got there, the price changed. So they have to start all over again, go back to regional accounting, get a new check. Stuff like that, it will make you want to pull your hair out just because they're trying to honor foster parents. And that is just like one tiny example of the stuff that they have to go through. So what they do is they pay for it out of pocket.
Yeah.
So we're trying to change little things like that just to move the needle to make the case manager experience a little easier on them.
Thank you.
All right, last question, y'all. Last question for now. Number 2.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Amazing story you just told. But second, it really is. Yeah. I can feel it. Second is just to follow up, and we can always talk offline later. What positions do you have now? I guess I see your service hours and stuff, but I've had some concerns from the community. I've kind of worked it out about people being there, and it was explained to me that there's a part of the program now is more home based than it is office based. So, what type positions are more telecommute than it is actual office now? What type?
The child welfare workforce, they're in the office. They really are. We just we cannot recruit, and if we do, we cannot keep front desk people. That is the issue. That's it. That's it. That's the issue.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
That's the issue.
All right. That's all the questions for now. Commissioner, if you'll continue.
Okay, I have a feel-good story. This past Saturday, a Southwest Georgia DFACS employee attended the wedding of 2 former foster kids who were on her caseload 24 years ago. They did not meet in foster care. They met later, but she stayed in contact with them all this time. And I just want you to know that case managers often stay in contact with their kids. That is super common. I just really liked that story. So, okay. Pivoting. Once a child enters foster care, they are enrolled in managed care Medicaid. There are just a few exceptions. It covers their health care, not their room and board, unless their treatment has a residential component that is like inpatient substance abuse treatment or involuntary commitment. Our children cannot afford to forego treatment, or they have very complex needs. And if they forego treatment, they can spiral into unmanageable behavior, which means they can be ejected from an otherwise wonderful foster home or wonderful group home, and we do not want that. So we created the Office of Health Law and Policy, which appeals insurance denials for our kids, and it takes the burden off of our frontline staff who previously would have had to prepare those denials. And we hired a bunch of attorneys to do it, paralegals, and administrative support, so a case manager doesn't have to prepare that paperwork. And you can see we've got some impressive stats here on what that little team is able to do, but the literal volume that we took off of case managers to do. This unit also includes a new vital records team, because I would hear from foster parents all the time that it is all but impossible to get copies of vital records for foster kids, and there technically shouldn't be obstacles to get those or to get them enrolled, but anyway, there are, and taking your child to the doctor and getting them enrolled is challenging without vital records. So we created this at the state office level. We've streamlined the process for getting those Social Security cards, and you can see, at launch, 58% of DFACS children had digital copies of their birth certificate. We're at 91% now. We're just missing out of state ones. But there's some really impressive stats here too. Okay. Uh-oh. Give me a second. Okay, I think that's the end of my slides, so I'm just going to leave it back on this one. Okay. All right. I hate that she left because this is what she would have wanted to hear. We recently created a unit to help older youth and families secure housing vouchers through public housing authorities. DFACS has agreements with 6 public housing authorities, including the Department of Community Affairs. Each agency is awarded 25 vouchers per fiscal year. Our agency is responsible for prioritizing youth based on need and the appropriateness for referral. As of January 2025, we've assisted in securing 33 vouchers for youth. The housing authorities have reported that 476 vouchers have been issued for families. All right, different topic. How we pay, I'm trying to cover a bunch of different topics just to show you we're doing a lot of good work in different areas, so just bear with me if it seems scattershot. How we pay for foster care is a complex combination of state and federal funds. Child welfare agencies have long used the Federal Social Security Act Title 4E to pay for foster care. There were some big changes a few years ago, and that included a restriction on how long agencies could use Title 4E to pay for a foster child stay in a group home setting. Unless an exception applied, you could only use it for a maximum 14 days. One exception was a model called the Qualified Residential Treatment Facility Program. Another exception is what Georgia has defined as the Commercial Sexual Exploitation Recovery Center, and that's for sexually exploited or trafficked children. Right now, Georgia's first Qualified Residential Treatment Facility program is a pilot that we got up and running at Murphy Harps, which is one of our longtime group home providers in Cedartown. It's got 10 beds, it's been operating for 1 month, and it is full, which means it's working. And to my knowledge, there are very few states that have even managed to get this model up and running, so we're very proud of that. Grace's Place is a 24-bed facility for trafficked foster children in Gwinnett. That's also state funded. It opened last February. I think right around or a little over 80 foster children have been placed there since it opened. And those two models, once they're replicated statewide, are truly going to change people's lives in Georgia and help keep families together, because they can, once they're replicated, they can in fact be used for non-foster children later on. But they also are models that fill a need where right now when children leave a crisis stabilization unit, if they were suicidal, or they leave a partial hospitalization setting, or they leave a psychiatric residential treatment facility, there's not a step down type intermediate level of care in Georgia. They go from acute level to group home or foster home, and it's just like a void. And that void, if a child's not in foster care, can be the reason why teenagers enter foster care. We see that a lot. And they may not even be abused or neglected. It just means that their parents bring them back home, and they don't know how to manage, they don't know how to cope with that kind of behavior, because they're not really ready to go back home into that kind of community environment. So anyway, all that to say, if we replicate these models, it's going to really fill a need. We're really excited about that. It also means we're going to draw down more federal funds to displace the state funds that we're using for those models now. And that took quite a significant amount of work to get up and running for both. All right. Different topic again. A couple of years ago, the General Assembly backed the governor's recommendation to fund an autism prevalence study among foster children in southeast Georgia. Anecdotally, we've suspected relative to the general population that we have a higher number of children living with undiagnosed or diagnosed autism spectrum disorder in foster care. We know specific cases with children where children with autism have entered foster care because their caregivers cannot find services. So they relinquish their rights, or the child is neglected, similar circumstances. Dr. Michelle Zena with Behavioral Pediatrics of Rural Georgia and the College of Public Health at Georgia Southern conducted an autism pilot study of children in our care. in DFACS Region 12. So that's Bryan, Bullock, Camden, Chatham, Effingham, Glenn, Liberty, Long, and McIntosh counties. And they found a 6-fold higher prevalence of autism among foster children than the general population. We think that that work warrants expansion and further study, and we'd be glad to share those findings with you. All right, I'm going to talk about the Special Victims Unit. I recently formed the DHS Special Victims Unit, which reports directly to me to work with Georgia law enforcement to better serve Georgia's most marginalized children. The DHS Special Victims Unit is a team of specialized foster care case managers, CPS investigators, 2 deputized officers, and technology developers. I often hear from law enforcement that they struggle to reach DFACS on time-sensitive matters. They need help at a crime scene, or they need time-sensitive information. I've personally fielded calls from sheriffs and chiefs when they cannot reach their local DFACS office, and that's for a variety of reasons. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying, there's a lot of reasons why they can't. The Special Victims Unit is flexible by design, but they are intended to be on call to assist law enforcement. But practically speaking, most of their work involves finding missing children and assisting in their rescue, but we say recovery. I will share several examples of the work. Last year, SVU was involved in 2 statewide recovery operations with federal, state, and local law enforcement for missing children. Last May, over 9 days, the FBI, Homeland Security, U.S. Marshals, GBI, the AG's office, and 9 local police agencies with DHS SVU in its infancy recovered 13 missing commercially sexually exploited children. That was over 9 days. Several were missing from foster care, and some were taken into our custody. Just 1 second. Get my pages stuck together. In addition to their own intelligence, law enforcement used information compiled by our CPS investigators. Social media handles, cell phone numbers, email addresses, known associates, identifying characteristics, links to online ads for sexual services, and suspected perpetrators that we know about our kids to conduct those sting operations and recoveries. 8 people were arrested with charges ranging from sex trafficking, child molestation, sodomy, enticement, child neglect, statutory rape, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. DHS SVU also helps on CSAM or child porn cases very frequently. Legally, we're allowed to share certain information with police and prosecutors. For example, a metro area police department asked us to review our records to assist in identifying the victim, an infant female, in CSAM that was uploaded from a specific address. We found a match in our records and identified the perpetrator in an hour, and he was arrested. Since its inception roughly 1 year ago, DHS SVU has recovered at least 51 missing foster children alongside federal, state, and local law enforcement, working with 80+ law enforcement agencies. Doing that work, but also as needed, I may assign SVU to work conflict cases, non-resident missing children's cases, multi-county child abuse allegations, literally, giving some examples, baby selling, and people who rehome children through Facebook groups. Okay, pivoting. How is it possible for foster children to go missing? Foster children who go missing from their foster or group home don't leave of their own volition. They are lured away by predators, or their trauma manifests into runaway behavior, or it's both. When they're missing, it is almost a guarantee that they will be exploited, since foster children are targeted. Young women are almost guaranteed to be sexually abused. Young men are almost guaranteed to be exposed to gang activity and violence. Many repeat runners in our custody were sexually abused, trafficked, or gang exposed before they entered foster care. Many children do not identify as trafficking victims ever. Many leave their placements and return to their abusers. and they do not view them as abusers. While they're missing, they may actually get branded by their perpetrators. In their placements, it is typically unsafe for these children to have unsupervised access to phones or internet. They set up secret social media accounts. They will contact the wrong people. Per policy, if a child in foster care goes missing, DFACS makes a police report. We notify the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC is what we'll call it. We update our records. We start searching. A police officer puts the child as missing in GCIC or NCIC, so the law enforcement community starts searching. Their missing poster will populate on NCMEC's website, and I would guess on any given day, at least 80%, probably more, of that website represents foster kids. And that's for any state. We do not have secure placements for foster kids who are at risk of running away. We cannot keep our kids locked down in their foster or group homes. If a case manager has a child's social media handles or cell phone number or email address, we can ask law enforcement to request on an exigent basis. And I did misspeak in my budget hearing. I didn't properly explain it, so forgive me. I'm going to say it right this time. We ask law enforcement to request on an exigent basis that those companies turn over the child's last location from logins or other use. So if those companies oblige without a warrant, police will get pings as the child moves around and uses those accounts, assuming that they keep using them. Some companies are more cooperative than others, and some of the data that police will get back is better than others. Our staff often worry that they're asking too much of local law enforcement to request pings or warrants or welfare checks at different addresses or status updates on investigations involving our missing kids. If there's a solid lead about a child's location, we may ask an officer to recover them or accompany us. At the scene, these children may be on drugs, and they'll start to withdraw from drugs not long after they're rescued. They might have weapons. They're usually in dangerous settings. They may have mental health issues that haven't been managed while they've been missing, so they'll need psychiatric stabilization. Some officers will not go recover a foster child, even if we know exactly where they are, unless there is a court-issued pickup order or a runaway warrant, because it's a liability concern for officers. Some judges will issue a pickup order if we simply ask. The order may say, like, for the child to be delivered to DFACS, the court, or detention. It may not say anything about where the child goes. It may say who can transport the child. It may not. Sometimes DFACS has to go file a specific complaint and wait for the warrant to be issued by the judge. Some judges will not entertain the notion of a warrant at all, so there's no mechanism for police to feel covered to recover our kids. The point I'm trying to make here is that it is extremely confusing from one county to another, from one judge to another. The child might also be on probation. They could already have a warrant through the Department of Juvenile Justice or an independent court. We don't know. We don't have access to those systems. So in any event, if police cannot recover a child for us, the case manager has to go, which gets to the point I was going to say for the examples I'm going to tell you. If the foster child is found in the metro area, which is typical, a Tifton area case manager has a long drive to go recover the child, take them to the hospital for examination, transport them to their placement, could be anywhere in the state of Georgia, and then drive back home. Some children refuse to get in the vehicle. Unfortunately, some of them get violent. Again, not blaming the child. I mean, they've just been through a lot. Again, may not be on their medication, lots of reasons. Some will literally jump out of the vehicle in the middle of the highway, that has happened, and run away again. These days, though, SVU can respond to the recovery a lot faster in those situations. We can also provide safer transport options. We can also assist with placement, which can be somewhat challenging for these kids because they do have complex needs. But in addition to that, we'd also like to create a training on this topic because it is complex, and we'd like to coordinate with POST if law enforcement would find it helpful. Human trafficking, I'm sure it's no surprise, is largely controlled by gangs. They operate across jurisdictional boundaries, so it is often challenging to determine which agency should run point. Multi-county child abuse cases are also challenging for DFACs. We don't know what county should be assigned. SVU has specially trained CPS workers to handle those if we need to. One child trafficking hotspot is Old National Highway, where you have Clayton County, Fulton County, the city of South Fulton, the city of College Park, where there's a line of rough hotels where we often find our kids. One child had a room in her actual name for several weeks, confirmed by the front desk person. By the time her family member found out and then told the DFACS case manager, and then DFACS called law enforcement, the child had been tipped off. I wonder who told the child. And she was gone. Another hot spot, I'm sure it's no surprise, is Fulton Industrial Boulevard. There are a couple of corridors in Cobb County. There are some areas in Augusta and Macon. Trafficking happens in every county, though. DHS SVU is able to provide subject matter expertise and quickly on nearly every fact pattern at this point, because we've facilitated recoveries across multiple jurisdictions. And the AG's office has also appointed a special legal counsel, which we use all the time. Often exploited foster children, once found, do not want to go back. Adults manipulate them through compliments and gifts, and they control them with drugs often when they're found. Unfortunately, some children will actually hit law enforcement and case managers. They will punch out windows, and they will get charged with crimes. And there may be nothing more heartbreaking when that happens, but perhaps when one of them who has been trafficked starts recruiting and exploiting other children. Last year, a missing foster child was recovered by law enforcement. Due to manpower constraints, officers couldn't transport her to placement, although DFAC staff worried she might try to run and turn violent, but they went ahead and picked her up from the precinct. As they drove away, she pulled a gun, put it to the back of the front passenger's head, and forced them to pull over. She fired at them as she ran away, blowing out a window. She had not been searched at the precinct. Through forensic interviews, we learned she'd started recruiting younger girls, forcing them to perform sexual acts, and taking their money, and she was barely 16. She still has time to change, but she now has traumatized other kids and 2 DFACS workers for life. Local law enforcement obviously was apologizing profusely. The case managers throughout the agency were terrified. Now, SVU can assist and ideally avoid similar outcomes. Theoretically, if he'd been employed at the time, Hunter Llewellyn, one of our deputized officers, who was a decades-long officer in Cobb County that worked crimes against children, might have asked if the child had been checked for weapons, if it was only as a precaution, but also since he'd recovered that specific child in a trafficking sting at his old job. He also might have been able to provide safer transport. Before DHS SVU, secure transport was only available if we had a court order or local police volunteered. In a sting where undercover officers responded to an online ad for services, a missing foster child was being trafficked in a hotel room. Her perpetrator was arrested. There was another teenager in the room performing sex acts, plus 2 toddlers. Their parents were nowhere to be found. DHS SVU was called. The judge gave us emergency custody. A different judge sent those children home because we wouldn't produce the ads in court because it's child porn. Thank you for your bill. SVU has found children missing from another state here in Georgia and safely returned them. We've uncovered a nonprofit that targets vulnerable moms in Atlanta, takes their children under the guise of letting them get back on their feet, cuts off contact, even if those moms ask for their children back, and then abuses those children who think that they're in foster care and kicks them out before they become adults. So what do? In an emergency room after recovery by police, one of our kids explained that she was expected to earn $1,500 every day by performing sexual acts. She was terrified about what her self-described pimp would do if she didn't immediately return. She described his appearance and a luxury vehicle, very distinct vehicle, It took us a few weeks, but we found him, and we gave his name over to prosecutors. And his day is coming very soon. We're very excited about that. We recently worked with Homeland Security to find a missing teenage girl who is now in our custody, who was trafficked across multiple states by a truck driver. And she was gang raped at gunpoint at a party in Atlanta. One of those men is a registered sex offender in Florida and Georgia. There are countless underground parties hosted at rental properties in the metro area where minors are sexually exploited. This child also stripped at several adult entertainment facilities in Atlanta. Several of our missing foster children do. I'm almost done. Through months of relentless searching, SVU located a 13-year-old who'd been missing from foster care for over a year. Her online ads for sexual services might be some of the most graphic images I have ever seen. As we scoured social media for leads, we would randomly see her in the background of people's stories and call the police, and we could just never catch her. In one of those, she was brutally beaten in Woodruff Park, just right down the street. She would ping up and down Old National Highway, again, where we ping so many of our foster children. When she was recovered, she showed us her Instagram messages where grown men would contact her for plays. She didn't know why she ran away, but she was thrilled to be back safe. That is an atypical reaction. SVU has found moms on the run with endangered infants, investigating a case where a new mother gave her baby to a Popeyes restaurant manager. We discovered an adult trafficking ring at 2 motels in Cobb County. We removed 8 children, all under the age of 9, in less than a week, and 5 of those children tested positive for meth on hair follicle screens. The day before Thanksgiving, 2 SVU CPS investigators drove to Macon and found 2 missing foster children at a motel on their own. Right now, we're tracking and expect to imminently locate several missing foster children. Hunter is literally with APD right now. We're preparing for a statewide recovery operation with law enforcement next month. Even though we are a social services agency, last year we were asked to join the FBI's new Atlanta Child Exploitation and Trafficking Task Force because our work is solid. We put our heart and soul into these cases. So as I close, I'll say thank you for this opportunity to talk about the good work that we're doing at DFACS. I couldn't possibly cover it all. There's so much more. I could speak for days. But I will take any questions that you have. Hopefully I did it justice today.
Okay, we're going to kind of keep questions to a minimum, so if y'all would, I know that was a great presentation, and I know that all the committee members probably have lots of questions, but I'm sure you'd be more than happy to have offline conversations with them. I do know that we have some bills before the committee, and we're starting to run out of time. So, number 10?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I did the Unholy Tour with Public Service Commissioner Tim Echols, and we did the I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Unholy Tour, but it travels all those areas. But Fulton Industrial is one that you did not mention that we went into. Do you tap into those other organizations that are doing likewise those same things?
I'm not familiar with the Unholy Tour.
But Public Service Commissioner Tim Echols is the one that sponsors.
I probably know some of the organizations, but
I can't think of the organization, but it's coming up this week. The one for Thursday is match tomorrow. And I guess the main question is, do you interact with these other organizations who are doing these same things for this sex trafficking?
I'm sure
that was a horrific experience for me.
I'm sure we do. Some of the CPS investigators I talked about, they've gone out late at night to Fulton Industrial and some of these places. I mean, and they literally will see minors out being sex trappicked. They will recognize them and make reports and try to get law enforcement to help recover them.
Okay, because that's what I said. She didn't say Fulton Industrial, and I just know what I saw in Fulton Industrial. Thank you.
All right, any further questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your openness and honesty and telling us all the good things that DFACS is doing. Too often we don't hear that enough. You had a question?
I was just going to say thank you for everything you do. When I was younger, I had a job. I won't say where, it's not there anymore, but someone would come in and ask me if I wanted to be an escort. I was very young, and they would come in, and it wasn't until I got older that I thought, oh my God. Now I think wow. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you. I will now call Senator Kirkpatrick up to present her bill. We are working from Senate Bill 8, LC 570179.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If it's okay with you, I've got my friendly DHS lawyer, Ms. Regina Quick, sitting here because, as you know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor. So if we get into the weeds too far, I may need to phone a friend.
Yeah.
And I'm working from LC 570179. No sub for this. What this bill does, it's a department bill from DHS, and it's designed to clean up an inconsistency between Title 17, the criminal code, and Title 15, which includes the juvenile code, relating to arrest warrants. It's designed to make sure that juvenile court judges have full authority to issue arrest warrants based on probable cause, like the other judges in Title 17. They were left out of Title 17, and this bill clarifies and restates this authority while preserving the power of the DA. The heart of the bill is Section 3, and I think you have a one-pager on this that looks like this, that kind of tells you what's
Why don't you distribute that?
what's in the sections.
Oh, okay.
But the heart of it's Section 3, which clearly illustrates the issue, and you'll see that juvenile judges on line 49 were just left out of this section of the code. And Section 1 has the statute in its entirety. The reason this is a department bill is because the department has a vested interest in the arrest of perpetrators of crimes against children that may come up during a court hearing, and any lack of clarity in our law creates a safety issue. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Members of the committee, Representative Oliver.
Much. This is a department bill. The juvenile court judges are not asking for this bill. Is that correct?
Actually, I think they were the ones that brought the issue. Is that correct, Ms. Quick?
So Representative Oliver, this is not a juvenile judge bill per se. The council didn't bring the bill, but that is how we first learned of the issue, when some judges brought it to our attention in cases, and they did appear at Senator Kirkpatrick's committee without objection to the bill.
There's been a conflict in some jurisdictions about whether or not judges wanted to issue warrants. Is that correct? Or were, in your view, authorized to issue warrants?
Yes, ma'am, to both those, and also confusion with clerks and law enforcement as to then the proper procedure once the arrest warrants were issued.
And the proper procedure is kind of where I am, because I used to be a judge.
Yes, ma'am.
The felony have to be, this is my experience, and this is why I'm confused. Felonies, when I was doing it, had to be investigated by law enforcement first. Misdemeanor requests for warrants could be requested by individuals, i.e. caseworkers. But I'm trying to figure out how the mechanics really work if a caseworker is asking a juvenile court judge to issue a warrant.
A caseworker would not be asking a juvenile judge to issue a warrant. This would be the existing code section in Section 1, which is already in the juvenile code, is sort of lays it out. So the judge would be hearing evidence that would constitute probable cause of the offense.
Who brings the evidence?
That would be in a hearing, in a delinquency hearing, in a probably in this case a dependency hearing, and the judge has heard the evidence that constitutes probable cause of a crime and decides that a warrant should be issued for the adult perpetrator, either in the courtroom or that's not before the court at that time.
So in dependency cases, there's usually not a law enforcement person there. There's usually a caseworker. Is that fair? Is that accurate?
That would be normal, yes, ma'am.
In delinquency cases, there may or may not be a law enforcement officer there.
I believe that's correct, although I might have to phone a friend to give you a completely accurate answer.
So this is my problem, Senator, the missing piece of the quote investigation. I can understand a judge hearing facts from anybody and thinking there's a crime here. I just wonder if a judge, if I were in that judge's position, would I want to issue a warrant myself, or would I rather have a law enforcement investigation, particularly if it were a felony thing? That's where I'm confused, because I think the conflicts have been arisen why DFACS wants a warrant issued and the judge didn't want to issue a warrant.
No, this is not a situation where DFACS is asking for a warrant. This would give the judge already has discretion to do it in the Title 15 statute. Where it creates confusion and lack of clarity is missing from Title 17. In the Section 3 in 17440, they were left out. Although they are courts of inquiry, they are left out. So the warrant then, the warrant authority, the authority to issue the warrant becomes less than clear.
So the juvenile court judge does have the authority in Title 15 to issue a warrant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think I know from my experience in various jurisdictions that various jurisdictions handle warrants differently.
That's exactly right.
You know, I worked in a jurisdiction where if it was a pro se warrant, it was not viewed on favorably by the prosecution, whereas in other jurisdictions, pro se warrants were viewed on very favorably. So I think there's differentiation between all 159 of our different counties.
And 500 cities, and there are 25 law enforcements in DeKalb County, and everybody has a
different soup. Anyway, any further questions for Senator Kirkpatrick on LC 57 number 2?
No, just at the appropriate time.
Okay. Do we have any further questions? All right. Seeing none, I will recognize Representative for a motion.
Make a motion to pass.
Make a motion to pass LC 570179. Is there a second? Any amendments? Hearing none, for passage of LC 570179, Senate Bill 8. How do you say? Aye. Any nays? There's a nay? One nay. Two nays. Okay, so.
Three.
All right. Three nays. Three nays. So who's a nay? One, two. Three. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Yep. Oh, no, you don't count.
Do you want to hand count?
Yeah.
You want to hand count?
I'm sorry. Sometimes Brian just feels like an extension of me. You know?
Past the point of some discussion.
I do. If you would like to have some discussion, sure.
Can I ask another member of the committee a question? Representative Olive, what do you think would take to satisfy you about this? What is that language we could do? I have so much confidence in your knowledge and background that if you're opposed to this thing, it gives me real second thoughts. It worries me.
Well, that's kind of you to say. And obviously I could be an outlier here because had some experience in this. I just would be conservative if I were a judge, based on testimony in front of me that's not been investigated by professionals to issue a warrant. I just think that situation is pretty unusual that the judge couldn't ask law enforcement to do something. The issue of trafficking, when you use the word prostitution instead of trafficking, you have a different kind of awareness that prostitution is a huge organized crime industry and that foster care children are definitely pulled into it. We have crimes against children, law enforcement professionals 8 different places in DeKalb County, at least. The DA's office, the solicitor's office, the attorney general's office, and I'm just worried about more silos as opposed to going back to the child abuse protocols. How does the DFACS and law enforcement really work together? Because they have to work together for the safety of everybody. So there's some conflicts there. There's just so many different arms of this, but I appreciate your nice things, but I could be an outlier on this, and I'm just very conservative about law enforcement relationships on the local level.
Can I just do one more thing now and ask the author of the bill one question?
Sure.
If we do not pass this today, are there current problems that we'll fail to solve if we don't go and pass this bill today, and what are they?
Well, just to clarify, what I understand is that this bill does not tell the judge that they have to do one thing or another. It's a may. And so we've already got magistrate court judges, we've got municipal officers.
And we have juvenile court
in the
judges in
bill.
the juvenile code that have this authority.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, we're not I'm sorry. The chairman will take a privilege and say that we're not expanding anybody's rights or privileges or anything like that. We're not making the whole any bigger or smaller. We're clarifying it so that it can be adequately and equally applied throughout the state. That's all we're doing.
Now, these kind of hearings are adversarial proceedings,
Everything in court is somewhat adversarial.
but at one time they were styled as in the interest of the child rather than adversarial.
They still have a more rehabilitative goal, particularly on the criminal side. They have a more rehabilitative role rather than a punitive role. So the best interest of the child, I think everybody is working towards that. But I think that the judges had some problems with some clarification, and they needed that clarification, and we're just providing it for them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we had already voted, and I guess we'll do a revote because of clarity. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Motion passes. I have your form that you will need for rules. So bring that up to me and I will sign it. We will then hear my bill, House Bill 434. Thank you. It's a great bill. It's a great bill. As soon as the chairman gets a copy. I'm now calling before the committee. It is considered a committee sub. It is House Bill 434, LC 481487S. As you will see, it looks sneaky. I don't like sneaky bills. I like clear bills. I like bills that say what they mean and mean what they say. So it's basically taking part of our juvenile code and putting it into the criminal code for the more adequate prosecution of the crime. So to be clear, I have provided you with copies of the OCGA that is being imported into the code. And so Basically, there is against currently in juvenile code, it is against the law to sell a baby. We are importing that into the criminal code because sometimes our prosecuting attorneys forget that OCGAs do not begin and end with Title 16. I can say that I worked for a prosecuting attorney's office, and I will say that Title 16 is kind of their end all be all, and sometimes they have problems with going to different sections. So this is just basically putting the juvenile code into the criminal code, and there are no additions, changes, deletions, but I wanted everybody to be on the same page. I wanted everybody to know what I was doing, what the referenced section of the code section said, and everybody to know what they were voting on. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Wow. I either did a really bad or a really good presentation. Seeing as there's no questions, yes, ma'am.
So I heard what you said, but I think I missed something.
Okay.
So you're removing the juvenile code.
I'm not removing
You're just
it.
adding it to
I'm adding it to
where again?
the criminal code
The criminal code. Can you tell me? Can you explain why?
because our prosecutors look for criminal offenses in the criminal code. And if they're buried back in the juvenile code, sometimes they aren't able to find them. So we want to highlight that, and we want to bring that kind of to the forefront for our prosecutors and say, hey, buying babies is bad. We want to bring that to the forefront, so therefore we're putting it into our criminal code.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Oliver.
Are you saying the district attorneys are not prosecuting cases?
There are very few cases that are being prosecuted. Naturally, it's anecdotal on my part.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't called up every prosecutor in the state and gotten their numbers, but anecdotally, I do know that I do feel that it's a very under-prosecuted statute, and I feel that bringing it back to Title 16 will enhance the prosecutorial ability of the prosecutors to make sure that they are charging it correctly, that they are prosecuting the case as it should be.
Ms. Quick and I had a helpful conversation before this hearing
Yes,
about
ma'am.
a large discussion that's going on among adoption attorneys right now about Georgia being classified as a unfriendly state for interstate compact stuff. There's kind of from my perspective, kind of a level of real concern about that issue among professionals. And I just wonder, is this bill tied to that?
No,
Particular discussion that's ongoing?
It's solely based on my experience with prosecutors.
Okay. So we'll continue to have some discussions about this adoption issue that the professionals are really...
I don't know if I'm still on it, but Speaker Ralston actually appointed me to that interstate compact for
Good,
juvenile.
then you can figure all this out.
So I will search around and see
Okay.
what's going on.
Thank you.
All right.
Removing it from that other code section, just moving it.
Okay. My attorney is telling me that it is removing it from 19.824 and putting it into Title 16. So it is striking it from there and putting it in Title 16. So, yep.
Since you have that smart attorney right there, can he explain why you couldn't leave it in that and move it? I mean, that's pretty common.
That was the decision that was made by the Legislative Council. My goal was to get it in Title 16. That's what I've achieved. So
Okay.
I got what I
I
wanted.
just wondered. I mean, it's not uncommon to leave it in both places.
Representative Draper, I'm trying to.
Thank you.
There.
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but who requested this bill?
It was
Or
from
was it
my
just-
understanding. It was just anecdotally from some conversations that I had with various prosecutors across the state. I used to work for a prosecuting attorney's office. I have a lot of friends, both that work as DAs, ADAs, as well as victim witness personnel throughout the state, and they told me of several cases that weren't being prosecuted, that were actually this thing, and they were being prosecuted sometimes as this thing. So I thought that better clarity would help.
All right, thank you.
All right. All right. So discussion is ended. Is there a move?
Move.
There's a move. Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank y'all. And with that, your Juvenile Justice Committee, or your Judicial Juvenile Committee, is adjourned.